When a Pokemon receives a new form, the unspoken implication is that it's supposed to be an upgrade. Megas are a clear example of this, yet this applies to every new form. Even the ones that aren't necessarily supposed to be upgrades. It's still an attempt to breathe new life into a Pokemon, which is done by upgrading them, giving them something new and valuable to do. So today we're examining the exception to the phenomenon, when a Pokemon's new form actually wasn't an improvement. And we're jumping in immediately with the Robo King of monsters, Iron Thorns. Iron Thorns may be a robot version of Pokemon's Godzilla from a billion years in the future, but Mechagodzilla or the T-1000 it ain't. Not even when going up against the comparatively tame T-800 Tyranitar in Gen 9. Tyranitar may be a UU Pokemon now, but it's a great UU Pokemon. Iron Thorns isn't even good in RU, where Tyranitar fell when it was at its lowest. Nope, Iron Thorns dropped all the way down to NU. At least it destroyed that tier pretty badly and got banned. But for a Paradox form of Pokemon's former king, what's it even doing there in the first place? Aren't the Paradox Pokemon supposed to be crazy min-maxed and OP? Like how Iron Valiant reimagines Gallade as the most insane offensive Pokemon ever conceived, far beyond what even Mega Gallade could have achieved? Well, strangely, Iron Thorns isn't quite so min-maxed. It has the same attack stat as T-Tar, but with much better speed, with base 72 as opposed to T-Tar 61. That's a major upgrade. It's also got the same physical bulk, no problems there, but it's much less specially bulky. T-Tar was famously a special tank because of its Sandstorm boost, and Iron Thorns would be going in a different direction. And even still, the drop from 100 to 84 was significant, and to top it all off, Iron Thorns went from T-Tar's base 95 special attack to 70? Sure, you want to have a trade-off in exchange for its benefits, but this is incredibly disproportionate to gaining 11 points of speed. The special attack, whatever, but the special defense? What is Iron Thorns even getting out of this? Right now, it seems like a strictly worse T-Tar. Okay, so it gets Quark Drive, which goes well with its speed, but other Paradox monsters go way faster and stronger. Iron Thorns just gets faster, and overall, it actually gets weaker given the special attack drop, and it's less bulky, also on the special side. And it's not actually that fast overall. What gives? Is this new type combination so terrifying that it must be not just held back, but nerfed outright? Well, Rock Electric is certainly interesting. You can't easily exploit Rock's water weakness when there's Stab Electric waiting to shock you. This aside, once you get past the novelty factor of such unique typing, it doesn't have much else to offer. In fact, it actually is laden with some serious drawbacks. Offensively, the Stab combo winds up being largely redundant. Rock and Electric have similar super effective coverage, both targeting flying, and they are both stifled by ground, which also ruins it defensively. Some cool resistances are overshadowed by the quadruple weakness that leaves Iron Thorns shattered by an earthquake. Iron Thorns' Electric Stab isn't exactly impressive either. Wild Charge is okay, but taking recoil for 90 base power is difficult to reconcile, while the alternative is an electric equivalent of High Jump Kick, Supercell Slam, except it comes in at 100 base power as opposed to HJK's 130. Wow, just what you'd expect of Tyranitar from the future. Let's put it this way, Tyranitar used to be the ultimate competitive behemoth that seemed to counter everything in the game. One pursuit removal and many additions of power creep later, it finally seems to have switched, to the point where it can actually be threatened by seemingly everything around it, hence the drop to UU. Iron Thorns is basically that, but somehow it's even easier to threaten, loaded with one of the worst weaknesses in the game, the Quad Ground, as well as many others, and the big payoff you get from working with this meager defensive profile is sub-T-Tar offense that is decidedly unimpressive even from a lower tier standpoint. Iron Thorns came in when Tyranitar was at its lowest, hardly making for a standard that was difficult to surpass, and yet it didn't even come close to matching T-Tar's Nadir. Now before we go into the next one, we're going to clarify the forms that we're examining a bit. Regional forms are theoretically supposed to be a lateral move, since it's not likely they're getting massive base stat total boost or anything. But let's be real, those forms come into existence to try and give a Pokemon new life, which means an upgrade. Look at Galarian Darmanitan, Alola Muck, and Hisuian Samurott. Look at something like Giratina Origin. Its altered form stats were merely switched around and Levitate was tacked on. Bam! Massive improvement. Now our next pick is a regional form and did have quite the high standard to live up to, as it's Galarian Zapdos. It is indeed not an upgrade, which honestly is to be expected, given the immensely tall order of having to match arguably the most successful OU Pokemon ever. Cantonian Zapdos is OU in every generation but the 5th, where it reigned over UU and still had a niche in OU, especially during a particularly tumultuous point in the metagame where Tornadius Therian was running circles around everything, which incidentally would be a big part of what Zapdos would wind up doing in future generations, especially once it gained access to its U-turn and knockoff punishing static ability in Gen 6. It's almost surreal how each generation shifts so vastly, and yet Zapdos is always there, elite as ever from its Gen 1 origin, where it was basically the second coming of Tauros if there wasn't a Rhydon on the other team, to the incredible heights it scaled so effortlessly both offensively and defensively Gens 2 to 4, to the superb defensive niche it took on starting in Gen 6 that's lasted all the way into Scarlet and Violet, where it's still somehow an excellent bulky tank, especially now that it can Terra into a Steel, Fairy, or Water type. For a new Zapdos form to be able to actually improve on this would be utterly insane, and yet Gyapdos, as it's called, makes an honest attempt at it. It is an utterly ferocious Pokemon, whereas much of Zapdos' appeal is the enormous offensive threat it poses while maintaining an excellent defensive profile. Gyapdos loses the defensive reliability in favor of even more extreme devastating offense. It being a physical counterpart to Zapdos is just the beginning. It too has an incredible stab combination, the Hawlucha-style fighting flying pair, made especially frightening by yes, its superb attack stat and 120 base power duel, close combat, and Brave Bird, which alongside Choice Band would indeed reduce most any defensive target to smithereens, while packing more than enough strength and coverage to effortlessly dust offensive Pokemon when equipped with the Scarf, enabling it to outspeed them. However, what really elevated Gyapdos to untold levels of terror was its Defiant ability. This meant you couldn't check it with the automatic go-to for any physical attacker, Intimidate. You'd actually wind up making it stronger, and a +1 banded Gyapdos hit so hard that even Landorus T would get smacked for fierce damage should it switch in against the best case scenario, resisted close combat. Simply dissuading Intimidate Pokemon already severely limited the not exactly wide pool of checks to such a powerful physical attacker. But Defiant had a more active role as well in how it punished the fog. You want to get rid of spikes digging into your team? Sure, you just better be ready to deal with banded Gyapdos brandishing +2 attack, achieving unreal levels of power that let it destroy everything in the game. Resists, physical tanks, all would be destroyed, as the way boosts work alongside choice items meant it wasn't +3 attack, which would already be bonkers, but instead even stronger. If you don't want to give it that +2 attack, that's also fine, as switching into Gyapdos is difficult enough without multiple layers of hazards carving you up. It created these situations which were basically guaranteed to get it a KO upon switching in one way or another. Yet for all this inescapable kaiju level overkill, Gyapdos can't quite match Zapdos, as while you don't much care that it lacks defense or longevity when the recoiling incurring Brave Bird is so thoroughly shattering that it destroys stall, it does also make Gyapdos a more specific Pokemon to put on a team and bring into battle, as opposed to its Cantonian counterpart, which famously seems to transcend the notion of having counters without it ever really becoming clear how or why. You think you have answers to it, and then it's the end of the battle and somehow Zapdos has made its way through 3 Pokemon that theoretically should be reliable answers. You're left in a daze trying to figure it out. You think it has something to do with the fact that it's bulky and has great typing, and can heal while also hitting hard even in its most offensive guises, but somehow it doesn't translate to reality, which has become completely inscrutable as you try to parse how something can be that impossible to KO and that strong simultaneously, and to pull this off so effortlessly to boot. It seems to occupy some sort of liminal territory between hallucination, dream, and the supernatural. The destruction Gyapdos dishes out may be nigh peerless in its unwallability, but it also lacks this more universally useful cross-generational talent of Zapdos's. In Gen 8, Gyapdos was UUBL, having hilariously destroyed UU. Even Zapdos didn't do this during his foray into the tier in Gen 5, defining and superb though it was. But then again, Zapdos was a strong OU choice in Gen 8. To be clear, Gyapdos had an excellent OU niche in Gen 8 as well, and was among the most feared attackers in the metagame, but indeed it was more specific. Then in Gen 9, Zapdos is still true blue OU, and Gyapdos is still lower tier, having dropped to RU. Of course, its power remains in the realm of superlatives that seem exaggerated, yet are still insufficient, having gained terrestrialization and knockoff, of all things. But the fundamental difference between it and Zapdos remains, and with a wider gap than before, as Zapdos' defense is more essential than ever to ward off the increasingly insane levels of power flying around Gen 9. While Gyapdos may pack the insane power itself, but is no longer quite as game-breakingly unique for it. While this was a case of a great new form not matching the truly elite level of the original, our next selection is a unique case. A new form that then gained another new form and wasn't great to begin with, but was made even worse, with Perrserker. Alolan Persian is itself a new form, and one that did improve on the original. Whereas Cantonian Persian had long since been hapless, Alolan Persian, while itself far from a good Pokemon, did have many cool things it could do. With its fur coat ability, actual physical bulk, and its amazing speed let it make the most out of an impressive Incineroar-esque support move pool. Parting Shot being the main appeal, alongside Taunt, and even its stab damage dealing moves being loaded with utility, from knockoff's item removal, and solid power of course, to foul place punishing of high attack stats. This all worked beautifully in tandem with Fur Coat. Of course, it was a mono dark type without any impressive stats outside of speed. Its low HP tended to undercut its Fur Coat physical bulk quite a bit, but it still could do something, most notably in its debut Gen 7, where in PU it would wield Z Parting Shot to fully heal an incoming teammate like some sort of pseudo healing wish, or could even function like a nasty plot sweeper. However, the newest addition to the Meowth line, Gen 8's Galarian variant, which evolved into the admittedly superbly named Perrserker, wasn't exactly the major improvement you'd expect when considering its positive traits. A mono steel type with good defense and slightly better HP than the Alolan Persian, and most notably, a base 110 attack stat alongside the Steely Spirit ability, which gave its steel attacks a massive 50% power boost. Oh, and it's got Swords Dance too. Alternatively, it can use Tough Claws for an excellent 30% boost to its contact moves, as in addition to retaining a solid boost on Iron Head, it also now includes Perrserker's other options in close combat and U-turn. How is this not a clear upgrade over Alolan Persian? Surely it's more impactful. Well, first of all, Perrserker is slow. It's base 50. It gets outrun by just about everything. This makes its less than stellar bulk pretty easy to lay into. Yes, it's got good defense, but that improved HP stat still isn't particularly high. If base 70 can plague Skarmory, well, Perrserker won't be doing too great, especially since at base 60, its special defense has plunged past the point of pitiful. As such, actually getting off those powerful steel attacks is going to be more difficult than you'd like, and even such opportunities are further tempered by the fact that Perrserker's Steel Stab was the 80 base power Iron Head, and even in the world of fairy types, Steel Stab isn't exactly the most spammable thing in the world. Tough Claw sets fare better in terms of powerful coverage, but the Steel Stab, the main appeal, still isn't quite as strong. Now in Gen 8, Perrserker actually seemed like it'd have a one-up on Alolan Persian. Both were untiered, unfit for even PU, but their viability differed in the unofficial tier below PU, ZU. We usually don't cover ZU, as there must be a cutoff somewhere, and PU as the last metagame considered official in the singles world feels like the natural point, but occasionally we have to plunder further depths, and this is such an occasion. In Gen 8, Perrserker was actually banned from ZU, while Alolan Persian remained in the tier, and early in Gen 9, Perrserker was quick banned from ZU again. However, as time has gone on and the metagame has developed, Perrserker has returned to the tier, and in the most complete edition of ZU yet, Alolan Persian has stepped out of the shadows to eclipse it, and by a significant margin too. The modern metagame is too fast for Perrserker's brand of slow wall breaking. Its best niche is as a stealth rocker, which it's okay at, but only just okay. Meanwhile, what does the fast pace of the metagame mean? That's right, Alolan Persian speed, outstanding by any standard, becomes much more valuable on average. Its defensive pivoting utility is terrific for letting it and its team dance around opposing threats while enabling its own. The difference between the two is significant. Perrserker presently occupies the B- tier in the viability rankings, while Alolan Persian is up in B+, which is a notable gap. B+ is the kind of Pokemon you'd want to bring to tournament play pretty consistently, whereas B- is where, while there's certainly something you can do, you're fighting to find the occasional use. To draw a more readily recognizable comparison, we'll use Gen 9 OU, where something flawed but seriously dangerous like Walking Wake is B+, while the likes of Blaziken, which takes a lot more effort to make work, is a B-. At the very least, both Alolan Persian and Perrserker are improvements over the truly destitute Cantonian Persian, but with the precedent of Alolan Persian, Perrserker has range from a lateral move at best, as it still can't even break into PU, settling for scrapping its sub-official depths to eventually becoming even lower than its predecessor in those very depths. And speaking of predecessors, we have Brute Bonnet. Amoonguss is one of the best Pokemon in both singles and VGC. Ever since Black and White 2, it's regenerated all over the place, leveraging its classic grass poison typing and strong bulk, alongside a bevy of utility moves, from the pseudo KO of Spore to the likes of Clear Smog in singles, and of course, Rage Powder in VGC. While singles has often seen it defy the tiering system in Gastrodon and Quagsire-esque fashion, even in today's Gen 9, though Amoonguss is in PU, it still has a decent niche in OU, while also seeing play in NU and RU. It's a pretty high standard for an alternate form to aspire to, but hey, that's what the Paradox Pokemon do. So what's Brute Bonnet got to offer in this area? Well, it's got a great name, that's for sure. It does away with all the Among Us jokes that everyone makes as if they're the first to think of them. It's also bizarre in the sense that it takes a long-time defensive staple and reimagines it as a bulky offensive terror, but that's exactly the problem. The imagined idea fails to materialize as concrete reality. Brute Bonnet has a great base 127 attack while retaining excellent bulk between 111 HP and twin 99 79 defenses. Its new typing is Grass Dark, giving it a more spammable secondary stat, and it sports several of the best attacks it could ask for, including close combat's ever-reliable power and coverage, and Sucker Punch's priority to bypass its non-existent speed. So why is it that Brute Bonnet has so thoroughly thudded into nothingness? Forget Iron Thorns, the Paradox Pokemon whose fall to NU was a blemish for such a seemingly strong Pokemon, even though it was banned from the tier. Now you have Brute Bonnet, who isn't even good enough for NU. It languishes in PU, and even there it's far from elite. It's decent and no more, currently sitting in B rank alongside other grass types in Rotomo, Hisuian Electrode, and Shaman. Basically, Brute Bonnet's failure boils down to how exploitable its typing is, combined with how low its speed is, completely reliant on the one-time booster energy photosynthesis combo to bypass it, and even when it does have that boost, it's hardly the scariest thing in the world. Stab, Seed Bomb, and Crunch are hardly leaving even the PU tier quaking in their boots, somewhat undercutting the whole base 127 attack of it all, especially as their super effective coverage isn't exactly stellar. It's decently bulky, but nowhere near the point which it would overcome the litany of weaknesses it brings to the table. It's basically the complete inverse of Amoonguss in this regard, terrified of fighting and fairy moves, to say nothing of its quadruple bug weaknesses that leaves it in the world's worst lose-lose situation against none other than U-Turn. It lives nigh invisibly in Amoonguss's massive shadow in VGC as well. The reimagining could have used a little more ambition. Heck, even just a stab above 80 base power would have helped matters. Knockoff might have been nice. Now, before we go to our final selection, we've got some honorable mentions to go over, with Dialga and Palkia Origin, and Alolan Dugtrio and Wugtrio. Now, these forms more than fit the bill for this video, and the only reason we're not mentioning them more in depth is that we've dissected their many failings numerous times in recent videos. However, we'd be remiss to not mention them at all, as their shortcomings are stunning indeed. Whereas Giratina was revitalized upon the playstyle overhaul its origin form gave it way back in Platinum, complete with Levitate as its ability, almost a decade and a half later, Dialga and Palkia basically received more of what they had been before, which had been amazing in their first couple gens and completely worthless in the most recent gens. Palkia was the better of the two, receiving amazing new speed, but even that wasn't enough to fix its fundamental flaws. Meanwhile, Alolan Dugtrio and Wugtrio reimagined Cantonian Dugtrio, one of the most broken singles Pokemon ever, as what it would be without the game-shattering Arena Trap, which is indeed completely and utterly worthless. Who could have seen that coming? Now finally, we move on to our grand finale with Iron Moth and Slitherwing. We're finishing things off with a monstrous double feature. Volcarona has been terrorizing OU since day one of Black and White. The second people realized what the effect of its Quiver Dance, then translated as Butterfly Dance, they put it into action as one of the most ruthless automatic game winners Pokemon's ever seen. Its ban has been screened for generation after generation, and Scarlet and Violet's terrestrialization was the type-changing straw that shattered the Mega Camerup's back, with Volcarona ascending past the ludicrously high standards of its own brokenness en route to finally getting axed from OU. This indeed set a high standard for either of its two. That's right, two Paradox forms to match, let alone surpass. But what makes this so fascinating is that it's hardly a Tyranitar to Iron Thorn situation. Both its Paradox forms are quite excellent. Iron Moth is clearly the better of the two, shocking since it's the one that more directly mirrors Volcarona's playstyle, but Slitherwing is no slouch. It ditches Volcarona and Moth's Fire Stab in exchange for fighting, becoming some sort of berserk new age Mega Heracross or something like that. It's slower, coming in at a base 81 speed, but it also gains a respectable base 79 defense stat from Volcarona's measly 65, making it more difficult to take down. In addition to its typing, making it Stealth Rock neutral, it also compensates for its speed, not just through the usual booster energy fashion, but from a tremendous, unique stat priority move, First Impression, one of the strongest revenge-killing methods for any overly speedy opposing Paradox Pokemon. It can also wield a unique defensive set that imitates Volcarona in its Morning Sun, healing and dishing out burns through Will-O-Wisps. Slitherwing thrives in UU and has a good niche in OU. Meanwhile, Iron Moth is a genuine OU terror, playing like an even more extreme Volcarona. It doesn't Quiver Dance, but it's faster, stronger, and even has more special defense, as if the remnants of a Quiver Dance boost were baked into its stat spread. It's a worthwhile price to pay for the reduced HP and defense. This and the fact that it's only got a standard Stealth Rock weakness now, as Volcarona's secondary bug typing has been swapped out for Poison, freely allowing Iron Moth to run the booster energy that sends its speeds to the stratosphere. It's a terror of power and coverage, and that's before you take into its many Terra possibilities into account. Iron Moth is a terrifying hyper offense staple, but as good as both of these are, especially Iron Moth, they don't match Volcarona. Heck, even Iron Moth doesn't match the terror of Volcarona in any generation, let alone the one where its heavy duty boots ignore Stealth Rock, and it changes type, while gaining what's effectively mega hidden power. Thus, it's more of a Galarian Zapdos situation. The new forms are great, but original form presented a standard that was impossible to match, let alone surpass. And thank you so much to our platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Hal, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Gameslayer, Nurse Jake, Pretzel SP, Soljiro Sakura, Spavoon, Skylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, Wardine for their major support of our videos.